Hi, California trust litigation attorney Scott Grossman here, and today I'm discussing how to get actual damages when you sue a trustee. If you sue a trustee for breaching his or her fiduciary duty, then you may be entitled to actual damages. What the probate code says is that if the trustee has breached their duty, then there are three different measures of actual damages. Those three will not apply to every case. They're intended to actually cover the three different scenarios that could potentially occur and to let you know what the measure of damages would be. So the first of those is if there's been some sort of loss or reduction in value because the trustee has breached their fiduciary duty to you. If that occurs, then your damages are the amount of that actual loss plus interest. So it's not just the loss, there's a rate of interest. It will either be the statutory rate of prejudgment interest, or if there's actual interest that can be measured, then that's the measure in that case. And let me give you an example to illustrate the point. Let's suppose that the trust owns a single family residence, and the trustee, for whatever his or her reason is, does not take out any homeowner's insurance. And I want to make this simple. The trustee knows that the trust owns this property. They know it's a single family residence. They know that the previous insurance policy has expired. So we're going to make this as clear as can be. They know the house is uninsured. While the house is uninsured, a water leak develops in the house. And that water pours down from the second floor to the ground floor. It destroys all the flooring that it touches, and the water actually accumulates down on the first floor, so there are several inches of the walls that are now water damaged as well. The contractor comes in, takes a look, and says, well, there's no question, all of this flooring will need to be torn up, it will need to be replaced. The walls either need to be entirely torn out or their lower halves need to be torn out. And oh, by the way, because the water sat for a while, there's now a mold problem. You're going to need mold remediation as well. Whatever that all adds up to, that's the value of the actual loss, plus interest. So whatever that number is, however long it takes for the trustee to actually correct the situation, to bring the house back to market value, it's going to be all of that money plus the interest that accrues over that period of time. The second measure of damages, where a trustee has caused harm to you as a beneficiary of the trust, is any profit made by the trustee through the breach of trust. Now, breach of trust is just the language of the probate code. That means that the trustee, who has a fiduciary duty to you, has failed to abide by or meet that fiduciary duty. That's called a breach. So here's an example of that. Let's say that the trust, among its assets, has a life insurance policy. So those proceeds upon death are payable to the trustee as the representative of the trust. The trustee does in fact collect those life insurance proceeds, and instead of treating those as an asset of the trustee takes that life insurance money and goes out and buys some real estate. And let's assume for this example that the trustee is successful. The trustee finds a house or a couple of houses that need to be rehabilitated, in fact does that work, increases the value, and then goes ahead and sells those houses at a profit. Well, obviously, whatever the value of the life insurance proceeds are, that belongs to the trust beneficiaries. That's coming back into the trust. But the probate code is real clear in saying the trustee doesn't get to profit from having done this to you. So any profits that they earn by flipping those houses, that's also part of the measure of damages, plus you are entitled to interest on whatever that profit is. The third measure of actual damages is where there is a missed profit, or the way the probate code refers to it is a profit that would have occurred if the trustee hadn't breached their fiduciary duty. And I'm paraphrasing. Let me give you an example that makes the point. Let's assume that when the settlor of the trust dies, the trust owns a small commercial building, part of which is rented, part of which is unoccupied. The trustee, for whatever their reasons may be, does nothing at all to rent out the unoccupied space. In fact, at a later time, the trustee opines, gee, I think it's easier to sell a building without occupants than with occupants. The trustee, of course, ignores that by having actual paying tenants in a commercial building, which is supposed to produce income, the trustee is in essence not realizing what should be the full value of the building. If there is some difference in whatever the sales price of that building is, the way it is, partly occupied, partly unoccupied, as opposed to what it would be if the trustee had gone and at a commercially reasonable rate rented out that unoccupied space, that will be the measure of damages. In other words, there's a missed profit opportunity that any reasonable trustee would have captured if they had simply abided by their fiduciary duty. So, those are the three different ways of measuring the actual losses that can occur where a trustee breaches their fiduciary duty. It is important to know that while oftentimes only one type will apply to a case, if you have a trust that has different types of assets in it, it is possible the trustee may be responsible for multiple breaches, and you may actually be measuring your loss depending upon what it is the trustee did with respect to the different types of assets in the trust.